Dearest friends, thought I would hop on here for a little bit and update you on John. And also, I had been for a while reading from the Red Sea Rules, which I find is an awesome little book. Stephanie introduced me to it several weeks ago, and I found some just amazing lessons in there. But many of you have asked how John is doing, and I feel like that is something I need to update because it's a praise. And but going back to the Red Sea rules, I'll kind of tie these together, talking about when the children of Israel were backed up to the Red Sea and there was no place to go, and they were so fearful. All of them corporately cried out to the Lord in their trouble. And you know what? He brought them out of their distress. Sometimes he calms the storm, sometimes he calms the children. But at the Red Sea moment, when they all cried out to him, he raised up the sea and it formed walls, and they were able to walk through on dry ground. That's amazing. And I know from talking to quite a few of you, some of you are at a Red Sea moment. I know several of you that have had a cancer diagnosis, and I've been there with my first husband, Mike. And even though God provided just amazingly during that time, he answered Mike's prayer. We did pray for healing, and the healing didn't come that time. And but many of the prayers Mike prayed were answered. I'm sure all the prayers were answered, just some. He was healed, but not the way we had hoped for. But he had 4 prayers he had prayed specifically, and God answered all 4 of them. Those are in the book, God's Grace Keeps Pace. And so coming back to this Red Sea moment, John and I found ourselves at that Red Sea moment once again, when your back was against the wall. And John first entered this battle with his heart. It's been 9 years ago now. It'll be 10 in December. So a little over 9 years ago, when he had open heart surgery, and it failed in 11 weeks. In fact, his cardiologist had said, "You're doing great, but if you ever feel that kind of pain that you felt before heart surgery, come running." Well, 11 weeks went by. John was just getting ready to go back to work. He worked for a week, and he walked out in the yard and he felt that kind of heart pain that he felt before surgery. And we went to the ER. Well, it turned out John's heart surgery failed in 11 weeks. He had 3 bypasses, and he has we learned, a condition called animal hyperplasia. Wherever he's cut, keloids form. And he had keloids form wherever they tied into the heart with the veins and the arteries. Wherever they tied in, it scarred up and failed. And so he was back on his old arteries, but with less blood flow, because where they tied in had scar tissue. And the doctor will never forget just saying, "I am so sorry. I am so sorry. There's nothing that we can do." He did suggest that we go to Houston. We went to Houston, and I remember that doctor saying, "Well, your heart is like a plant that's rooted in dirt, and it's not getting much water to the roots. Your heart's not getting much blood. And the more that soil dries, the arteries around your heart, it's just going to eventually, the plant's going to wither up and die." He's talking about John's heart. And he said, "We can attempt to put in a stent, but chances are that animal hyperplasia is going to come into, it's going to scar up." But John had that stent placed at that time. And it served him well until this last October, when he had COVID, and they believe can't even think, blood clot took out that one stent. He only had one stent. And so let me tell you, from November, when that first failed, until we went to the Mayo, John could do very little. He couldn't walk up our driveway. And it's not a real long driveway, but it is uphill. He couldn't walk up that. We pretty well stayed in. If we were able to go to church on Sunday, he couldn't walk up the stairs, but he could if we parked in a handicap park and he just took his time walking in, he could take the elevator. Well, then we went to the Mayo, and as most of you know, that surgery failed. That they put in 2 stents, and on his way out of the recovery, that artery closed down. That it was a vein, bypassed vein. It closed down, and they had to take him right back into surgery. And the doctor came out and told me, she says, "I am just so sorry." She said, "We're going to have to send him home like he came. We're back to where we started." And she said there may be, the doctors met and they thought there might be something else they could do down the road. Fast forward to last weekend, and John started to feel better. And he talked to the Mayo on Monday. This is a repeat of some of what I've already said, but Monday was a week ago, and she says, "I have no idea what's going on. Just stay on your medication that opens the arteries." But John had already cut that medication in to about a third of what he was taking. And she said that was okay, but don't take it any lower. He's still on a third of what he was on. Yesterday, he walked up the steps to our upstairs Sunday school room without taking the elevator. Saturday, he got the ramps out and brought the lawnmower out of the shed and mulched the leaves. And then he raked them up. He is doing things he was unable to do after that failure in November. We have no idea how he's doing these things, but he is, and the crushing pain is gone. And that's on a third of the medication he was on. And bear in mind that medication, it's called Endure, but it makes him very tired and makes him feel bad as well. So to be on just a third of that is amazing. Just as these Israelites cried out in prayer, imagine that was I think it was about 2 million people. They cried out in prayer to God. Well, I know people all across the United States have been praying for John. Our church prayed. Our individual groups prayed. Our Sunday school class prayed. My friend that lives in Colorado has a man in Africa that is in a wheelchair. I believe she told me he prays for John regularly. So all I know is that as everyone prayed for John, his surgery failed, but our God didn't. John is able to do abundantly above what we ever hoped without surgery being able to fix him. We don't know if God is granting this long term or if he's granting it for a season, but you know what? We don't have to know. John wakes up every morning and he praises and thanks God that he's alive to see another day. And just like that Red Sea moment where God parted the Red Sea, I know at times he answers just like that. He parts and makes a way where there seemed to be no other way. Some other times he just calms that child. That's what he did with Mike. He calmed him, he gave him peace, and he answered the 4 most important prayers that he prayed, but he took him home. I don't understand. I know that Jan wasn't supposed to live to be 3, and Jan lived to be 28. It was a hard walk, but it was such a blessed walk. So all I can say from my almost 72 years of living, God is faithful. We don't have to understand the whys and hows of everything. We just have to understand that he is faithful. He is with us every step of the way. He is present. goes before us and behind us. And just like our trip to the Mayo, and we saw on the radar, the storm was behind us and in front of us. And you know what's the strangest thing? We had come through the area which the radar showed the storm behind us, but we didn't come through that storm. That storm mounted up after we went through on dry land. Then it came around us and in front of us. I can't explain that, but I know it happened. So all I'm saying, wherever you're walking, if you're in a Red Sea moment, just trust him with it. Don't get into fear. Don't panic. No, there's one that loves you. He saw you in your mother's womb. He numbered the days of your life before you were ever born. And he has a plan for you, and it's a good plan to give you a future and a hope. So don't grow weary, just trust. And that's where John and I are walking right now. We're just trusting. We don't know what tomorrow brings, but none of us do. We just know his word is true, his scripture is true, and we trust him. Okay, for someone that's hurting, I hope this helps. Much love, Pam.